I want
Yeah.
I want to ask you about something that we definitely don't disagree about. I want to handle all the disagreements first, but I definitely want to ask you about Ukraine because we got this issue right first. A lot of people that we had on show, the Gray Zone, we got the issue right first. Your channel exploded ever since the Ukraine coverage because you've been exposing the narrative, and you pay for it as well. And this, especially ever since I saw your PayPal get taken down, I've seen a lot of people being censored online. I'm like, fuck, when they gonna come for me?
I'm surprised they haven't yet.
So I'm gonna ask you this question: why do you think the establishment, very vague? I would love you to. Why do you think the establishment is so scared of people just speaking the truth on Ukraine? What do they have to hide? Go ahead, Jackson.
I think it's, they've come after a lot of people, not just me. And I'm surprised. I'm sure they'll come after you. But I think what they have to hide is that this is the first time ever in which we've seen the multipolar world in action. You know, you have Russia acting as a balanced and even more powerful buffer to NATO and to the West, not just in the bout of military superiority in Ukraine, but also in the battle of economic attrition that's been waged against Russia. And they've been quite successful. And I think that worries the West, not just in terms of how this is going to end in Kiev. I don't think they really care about that. I think what they care about is what this means for the future of energy markets, what this means for the future of control of global dollar hegemony, and whether or not there will be a substantive replacement within BRICS. I think that they care about, trade. Obviously, China and Russia are expanding greatly, and the United States is losing out on our trade partners. And I think that probably the most preeminent concern amongst these sorts of figures in the European Union or in Wall Street in London is the idea that many of them share, not all of them, but many of them share. And it's a Malthusian ideology that the world has a certain sort of carrying capacity of 1 billion people. And if we go above that, then we're not going to have the ability to carry life for future generations. And China and Russia pose an alternative to that through their pro-growth, pro-industrialization, pro-population expansion worldviews. And for that reason, this worries the West a lot. So I think all of those things combined are why this is so much different than, say, any sort of political commentary on like Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria or Venezuela, because this is the first time that they have a very serious threat.
And I asked a few people this question just because I'm curious. I go back and forth. Was they really this stupid in thinking that the Russian sanctions were going to win them this economic war? Or was it a global controlled demolition? I heard Jimmy say that. I go back to, like, there's some people, you heard like Lindsey Graham say this in 2012 where he was like mocking the size of Russian economy. He was like, oh, Russia got an economy the size of Spain. So there's some people I think really do believe they could have won the economic war, but I also go the other way. Well, I'm like, actually, they probably do just want a global demolition because you see all the worker class movements rising up. And I think they just want to remind people who's boss. They want to put people back in their place, put people back in the struggle. If a lot of people die, they wouldn't mind that. Depopulation would be great for the global agenda. Which do you think it is? I'm just curious. Like, do you think there was a controlled demolition, or do you think someone really was dumb enough to think they can win this economic war?
I think those are both valid points. I think that definitely, there's no doubt that many in Wall Street and many in London underestimated the capacity of the Russian economy, especially we're about to go through a commodities boom. They're a commodities producer, we're not. And I think they underestimated them. You hear people like Graham or like DeSantis who've called Russia a glorified gas station, which is just insane. But I think that also there is a genuine aspect of this. And I wouldn't say that like all of the sanctions embody this, because I do think that they expected Russia to fare just as poorly as every other nation that we have ever sanctioned into oblivion. But I do think that there's an aspect of this which is probably led by, the more non-Euro West to try and bring about the collapse of Europe. And I do think that this is being under the guise of trying to bring the EU completely under the reins of London and Wall Street again. And I think it's also being done with the explicit intent, as you put it, to try and usher in this great reset, rob the masses of their wealth, leave them not only with nothing, but in serious debt. That's what we're going to see after this winter. They're expecting like over half of the UK is going to be in very serious debt. So I think that's part of it. I think it's both.
Do you see? Because I want to ask you about the European energy crisis. While I have you here, it's crazy. They wanted to sacrifice everything to uphold their hegemony. In order to uphold full spectrum dominance, they're willing to tank their entire working class and hope they take it. And I think go either way, whether they take it or whether they revolt, because a lot of people are very passive. You just talk about the UK, and there's a giant energy crisis that is going to happen there. And this is the messaging that is coming from the UK ruling class. Boris Johnson blames Putin for worsening cost of living. And when this heat crisis comes, they're going to say, well, the Russian government, they want us to buckle. He likes it. This is another one. You had, this is what Caitlin Johnson said, the U.S. has, out of purely egotistic reasons, dragged Europe and especially Germany into a trap that will lead to its economic and social destruction. And it's actually very evil what they have done, because the stocks of weapon defense manufacturers have gone up. Ukraine politicians have voted for a 70% pay raise. A lot of them are getting random mansions in the Netherlands, for example. So we are seeing this heist of the global working class that is happening by the imperialists on a massive scale. So what are your thoughts on the European crisis, and how do you think this is going to end? Because this is, like, I've been warning, like, I've been telling people that don't follow the news. I'm like, guys, this shit about to get crazy in Europe if you guys are not paying attention. So what's your prediction, and what are your thoughts on that?
It's going to be a crisis the likes of which we've never seen before. In all of recorded history, there's never been an instance in which a country or a set of states have sanctioned themselves into economic ruin, and that's exactly what we're seeing now. And it's kind of poetic, actually. But I think that this is an example that we can actually point to of the failures of globalism, right? The failures of the European Union. You now have all of these member states of the EU that are fighting back, workers primarily, actually fighting back against those EU elites that are telling them that they have to suffer 15%, 8% energy reduction in their countries for the next, 4 or 5 months, maybe for the foreseeable future. This isn't just going to be limited to this winter. It's going to be multiple winters that they have these sorts of crises. And the workers of these countries are fighting back, and they're saying, actually, this doesn't make sense for our country. It doesn't make sense that I'm going to have to shut my small businesses' doors, or I'm going to lose my job as a result of Germany's inability to open up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, or drop the sanctions, or, diversify their energy sources. So, this is, workers who have a structural critique of the globalist elite that are forcing this upon them, fighting back. And I think it is going to be the demise of the EU. You're already seeing countries like Poland, for example, come out, and Poland's no fan of Russia. They're probably one of the most Russophobic countries right now in the world. They're coming out and saying that they don't want to work with the EU or with the euro anymore. They want to have their own national currency. So I think this is the demise of the EU, and I think it's going to be absolutely catastrophic.
That's why I think they're trying to go out in a bang. They see what's going on. So they're like, we might take the whole world down with us. I don't know if you saw this. I gotta read more into this. This is a story I was gonna read into a little bit more, but this goes into the long-standing new strategy of escalating against China, and this is just another strategy to distract the global working class from them being robbed. Look at the evil China. Look at Putin, the evil Putin. And now they're trying to escalate war with China with Taiwan. We saw that with Nancy Pelosi's visit. And now you see with this story here. This was tweeted by antiwar.com. Biden to ask Congress to approve 1.1 billion arms sale for Taiwan. The planned sale comes amid soaring tensions sparked by Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. So I want to ask you this, Jackson. I don't know if you read this particular story, but that seems pretty goddamn crazy and blatantly escalatory. So what is your take on the United States blatant push to provoke war with China? What do you think that's about?
I think that, again, it's the same thing as Russia. It comes down to a pro-growth versus anti-growth worldview. China poses probably the strongest case for a pro-growth worldview. In the past 40 years, they've lifted 840 million people out of poverty. That's thanks to the strategic, brilliant planning as a result of the Communist Party of China and Xi Jinping's leadership in large part, but not in whole. And lifting people out of poverty, specifically in regions like Tibet, in Xinjiang, and other rural regions of China. They've been able to guarantee free housing, free clothing, free water, clean drinking water, by the way, free food, free education to their people. And this is something that, despite all of the glory that you hear about it in the United States and in the West, we can't come close to anything of the sort. We can't even get free healthcare for our people in the United States. So I think that this is what it comes down to. China poses a unique threat to the United States because their population is 3 to 4 times the size of ours. So obviously they're going to be a much stronger economic powerhouse than we are going to be ever in due time. And the West is very worried about this because China is replacing us and filling all the vacancies of former U.S., trade relations, because our trade has always been unfair. It has always prioritized, essentially raping and pillaging other nations and their peoples, and dictating to them what they can and can't do in their governments. Whereas China focuses on, like we said earlier, what should be the tenets of good internationalism, win-win cooperation, from an internationalist mindset that creates the industrialization of all nations.
Well said. Last question, which kind of related because the state of the left is very related to Ukraine because they all NATO puppets now. We call them the NATO squad. They all voted to expand NATO. I want to ask you, because we're gonna have an activist summit in October. We are pushing mutual aid. I have a mutual aid organization I'm starting in Kansas City. We're giving people diapers, doing free school supplies giveaways. CJ starting a chapter in LA, and the reason why we're doing this, we're not doing this because we think this is the automatic solution to all the problems we face right now. We're not saying that RBN, mutual aid, and activism alone is going to solve all the problems, but we might as well do fucking something. And we got with the amount of corrupt, evil psychopaths that we are facing, I feel like we need to do something. So, based on, I want to ask you about your state, the state of the left. Like, you can talk about in terms of electoral politics, like whether people should vote for Democrats or anything. Like, what do you see as the step forward to challenge imperialism, challenge these people who giving billions of dollars to Ukraine, the people who are funding the cops more, the people who are stealing and busting homeless encampments. So the last question I want to really ask you before we move on to super chats is what do you see the direction of the left? What do you think the direction of the left should be? And when I say left, I saw someone say what left. Let me just define it this way, just so we can avoid label. If you want to end the military-industrial complex in the capitalist world that we have right now, what do you think is the best strategy, and what do you think of the state of the anti-imperialist movement right now?
I think, speaking broadly, because there's so many different outlets in which you can work to achieve this, it is what I strive to do on my channel in terms of, media communication to different people. It's the effort of trying to expose the contradictions of the oligarchy and of the people, connect and represent and understand and identify the structure, superstructure, and infrastructure of America as a country and its history, and fight to create a country that is better for all people. As for, it's very vague, but as for the left, I mean, I think my advice for the left today is that the left has, again, isolated themselves from the masses, and there is no connection amongst the left and the average American person. The left is more concerned with casting away any single person that doesn't agree with them on every single issue than they are than they are concerned with actually building any sort of viable future for the people of this country. To bring up an example, I do not think that it is rational nor strategically viable to call someone like myself a fascist just because I identify as a patriot who's probably one of the most outspoken in the world against what the U.S. empire does. I think that this is very self-isolating, and I think it's actually dangerous to people that are being called fascists because it. If you say that fascists should be killed and then you're calling someone a fascist, I think we all know what that means. There's no reason to beat around the bush. But yeah, I think that the fake left has tried to elevate themselves above the national reality, above the people of this country. And I don't think that you're guilty of that. And I don't think that, many who reside in the sphere of our politics, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah, I know
affiliated
exactly
with.
what issue you're talking about because we call it out all the time.
Yeah.
The issue of the fake left, the people
And
who are trying to divide, and we have to be very careful of who we are talking about. And there are the people who are purposely, and we all know who they are. They are Democratic operatives. These people do not
yes.
operate in good faith. These are the fake left that they do everything they can to get people to support the Democratic Party position. Now
Yeah.
there's real activists on the left that need that has been crushed by the inside, by the outside, and we had taken L's. A lot of them have been taking L's because they've been ignored. And I think a lot of the people that are really in the struggle, they're not doing a lot of this childish nonsense that hurt in the left. The people who that do a lot of that childish nonsense that really make the left get bad, they are pushed out for a reason, right? But go, I want you to finish your thought because we do agree that there's a big problem with a lot of people who, because Bernie is guilty of this. Like, this is Bernie's fault because Bernie convinced a lot of people that they're socialists when they're not. Bernie and a lot of people thought that this movement was larger than it actually was. And then now and after the movement ended, now we got siphon through who's really anti-establishment and who's really anti-capitalist. And I noticed the people who are to the right of other people like me or you, they will just assault. They will assault and they will attack anyone who challenges them left. But I want you to finish your thought, Jackson. We go to super chats. And
I agree with you. I agree with you. I think that, and you say, Democratic operatives, I think it's the same. I think it's people who prioritize partisanship over national critique. I think that national criticism is the pathway towards deepening of our national reality. And I think that's the only path forward for us in this world to try and uphold a multipolar world and build that and combat the globalists. So I think that this is exactly what we need to do. And again, we might all agree on the critiques of our nation, of the state, of the MIC, and of the intelligence community. But if you are a partisan, then you are going to disregard whatever common national critique we might share and cast me away and isolate yourself to try and prioritize whatever hyper-partisan worldview we have. So I would say my message to the left and the right is don't do that, because that is not going to build anything, and that's exactly what the elite want.